Actually, I talk about trading crypto and trading different assets using volatility, entropy, probability, and statistics. But now, that's right now, I'm going to tell you about the biggest crypto and Bitcoin news that's happening today and right now. Why? Mostly because I'm not telling you this information for trading purposes. In fact, quite the opposite. I'm telling you this information so that you don't use it for trading purposes. Why? Well, because that's not how you trade. If you rely on the news for trading information, you are going to be misinformed, misled, and eventually you're going to get wrecked. Who needs that? So, what is the big Bitcoin and crypto news du jour? Well, let's start off with Ethereum. Ethereum had a software upgrade yesterday, which many people thought would lead to the immediate demise in the Ethereum price from where it was near $4,000. It had been slightly over it in recent days and was in the upper 3900s yesterday and remains there at the moment. Why is it that people thought this software update would lead to a massive reduction in price for Ethereum? Well, some people were thinking that because this software upgrade would not actually properly address the major outstanding issues about Ethereum, namely the very high gas fees that remain despite its shift from proof of work to proof of stake in last year's mainnet upgrade, or not upgrade, but shift from proof of work to proof of stake, and this year's major upgrade, which launched yesterday. It was supposed to address in this latest update a way for gas fees to remain lower and for people to be able to unstake their previously staked Ethereum. But there were some issues with some large stakeholders, and effectively the software upgrade, if you know anything about Ethereum, was actually never going to reduce gas fees significantly in the last upgrade. In fact, it wasn't designed to do that at all when they shifted from proof of work to proof of stake, which leaves you wondering, why would you shift from proof of work to proof of stake if you're not going to have any impact on transaction fees? Well, because that would decentivize the people who were mining at the time from shifting to POS, and that would reduce their interest in being transaction operators. So the gas fees were left as they were. Gas fees basically stayed ridiculously high over the past year. And following this latest update, even though it's supposed to, in theory, enable lower gas fees, the fact is there's still no real incentive for that to happen. And therefore, gas fees are likely to remain as ridiculously high as they previously were. If you look at a typical NFT transaction, for example, using Ethereum, the average cost right now for just the gas on the average NFT is around 125 bucks, which is insane. There are in fact many transactions where people using Ethereum are paying more in gas fees than the actual cost of whatever they're buying using Ethereum, which tells you how insane and what a scam the whole Ethereum gas fee model is. It incentivizes large stakeholders and people who process transactions to basically rip off the consumer as much as possible, because Ethereum is designed to be the bank's best friend. The big banks, the huge financial institutions, the huge corporations, huge central banks, Federal Reserve, etc. They all have Ethereum developers working for them, and that's why it's the biggest crypto developer network, because the Ethereum Foundation is closely connected to many of these organizations around the world, and they have absolutely zero interest in lowering fees. They want to get people used to using a network that has not particularly great throughput of transactions and not particularly great flexibility and really not great store of value compared to something like Bitcoin. It's arguable. You can say it is or it isn't, whatever. It's also not particularly great being truly decentralized, even though it is decentralized, it's just not nearly as well as Bitcoin. And all in all, now that it's proof of stake, it is not necessarily as secure as proof of work to be, but it isn't necessarily as secure proof of work. Anyway, I don't entirely hate Ethereum, but I do think that it's gas fee, and yet they choose not to. And one of the reasons they choose not to is because it enriches the large bag holders while keeping everybody else who wants to use it in between a rock and a hard place, and screws the little guy out of a lot of money for what should otherwise be cheap transactions. And yet they claim to be the second most valuable crypto because of their market cap. Well, that market cap is only held up because of actually the price of Bitcoin. And so many people who trade, large organizations who trade, especially who trade baskets of crypto, so they will buy portions of Bitcoin and ETH and many other top cryptos that they trade. So that is one reason that Ethereum's price has held up relatively okay, although it is certainly not nearly as high in its value compared to Bitcoin as it once was. In fact, it's only about 0.54 Bitcoin per, 0.054 Bitcoin per Ethereum. So it's really not, particularly great value. And if you look at the rates of exchange between Ethereum and Bitcoin over the past year, even, it has not been a very good year for Ethereum compared to Bitcoin, despite the rise in price since the lows of November and December 22. So that's the big news on Ethereum. What about the big news on Bitcoin? Big news on Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is coming up on a fourth halving. What does that mean? Well, I've told you before about it. It means that there's going to be a supply shock. That's another reduction in supply. And that reduction is 50% of its current supply being produced. And it means that every day there will be only half as much Bitcoin being produced. When you consider there's less than 2 million Bitcoin left to produce, in fact only about 1.5 million left to produce over the next 120 years. That means that it's going to take a long time for Bitcoin to be fully mined. And the energy used to mine those last 1.5 million to 2 million Bitcoin is going to actually be more than all the energy used to produce the first 19.5 million. Bitcoin. Now, how can this be? Well, because the demand is going up naturally, and the competitiveness of miners is going up as more mining companies attempt to mine a greater share of what's left. They're adding more servers to the network to mine it. And I know the green people are going to say, wait, this is bad for the environment. Stop mining Bitcoin. Well, the fact is, most Bitcoin is already green since years. Most Bitcoin is mined using green solutions, clean energy solutions. They're using solar, they're using wind, they're using hydro plants, they're using all kinds of different systems that are eco-friendly, alternative clean energy in order to mine crypto and Bitcoin. Why? Because why not? First of all, it's good for the environment. But second of all, because these miners are not necessarily altruistic or concerned about the environment, the fact is, clean energy has become significantly cheaper over the past number of years, and in fact is cheaper than traditional energy sources, cheaper than coal, cheaper than gas, cheaper than petroleum, oil. So it is in fact a cheaper model to use now. And I know people will say, oh, it's a scam, green energy is just a scam. You still have to power it with all the world's power sources. Well, not at the infrastructure level. Yes, it's true that if you have an electric car and you plug it into the grid, there's a very high chance that some of your electricity, if not all of it, is coming from coal-fired plants or oil or gas. But if you're actually producing clean energy, then the best argument you have is that the machines that make the clean energy are still produced using gas or oil or coal. Okay, in some cases, or in a lot of cases, that's true. However, that shift is taking its effect, and as more and more companies are shifting towards clean energy use, and more clean energy providers come online, even though their equipment may be using old energy sources in order to be manufactured, once those devices are manufactured, they don't have to use those old energy sources to maintain those machines, right? They're using their own electricity, which is clean electricity, to maintain their devices, and could easily use clean energy to produce new devices. So the companies that make the clean energy machines can certainly create them using clean energy. So it is a silly argument to say that this will never be beneficial to humanity, because obviously if we are in a world that uses mainly old energy sources, we still need to use them until we are shifted more towards clean energy. Once we are shifted more towards clean energy, then it is obviously going to be the fact that the default clean energy source, or the default energy source for manufacturing, as well as for use, etc., is going to be actually clean energy and not old school polluting energy. Now, does that mean that old school dirty energy is just going to disappear overnight? No, it will probably linger on for hundreds of years or at least decades while this shift happens, and there will always be some industries that need heavy petroleum, etc., or gas or coal to operate, but those will be far and few in between, and they will have a minimal impact on the grand global scale compared to today, where a massive percentage of the energy being used is derived from dirty energy sources. And once you remove those massive chunks, like personal transportation, public transportation, airplanes, whatever, then it will be a much, much cleaner environment. Now, you can tell me, well, airplanes aren't going to be using clean energy anytime soon. Would you really want to fly in a jumbo jet that's using solar power? How can they fly at night? Okay, so the answer is obviously these things and these shifts take time, and you could have hybrid airplanes, just like you have hybrid cars, right? You can have all kinds of different systems develop over time that enable not just air transport, but ground transport and even water transport to shift more and more towards clean energy, including electric motors for ships, more electric trains that don't use coal as a source for their energy, for their electricity. So So over time, we will see more and more clean energy happen. And again, coming back to crypto, we are going to continue to see more and more mining happen using clean energy sources simply because of cost. The cost benefit outweighs using dirty energy for now. And if you tell me about Bitcoin uses a huge amount of energy, more than some countries, yes, and many things use more than some countries. There are many small countries in the world that is compared to, and if you think that Bitcoin uses more energy than printing and housing dollars in warehouses and banks and safeguarding them under lock and key with security forces and safes and big buildings and massive printing presses and all these other things, people that work for the printing presses and everything else, then you got another thing coming, because the fact is Bitcoin uses actually less energy than fiat. There's absolutely no question about it. Fiat uses a massive amount of energy, as does as do other fiat sources and fiat derivatives. One of the reasons that that's the case is because, well, you have electronic computer systems that run digital fiat. You have electronic systems that are using old school gas, that are using old school sources for energy. And that is something we are seeing, and that is why the shift to clean energy has been happening for years in crypto, not just on Bitcoin. All right, happy cryptoing.